Pale Rider wasn't just a Western, it was a ghost story, a grim allegory for the violent death of the American dream, filmed by a star at the height of his power who was channeling his most iconic character through a lens of apocalyptic fury. Behind the stunning Sierra Nevada vistas and the tale of righteous vengeance lay a production so cold and remote, it felt like a purgatory, a film set where egos clashed as violently as its on-screen gunfights. What audiences saw as a triumphant return of the classic Western hero was, in reality, a dark meditation on faith and violence. A film made by a man who was no longer just playing a myth, but had become one. Today, we're riding into the storm to uncover the secrets behind this modern classic. Here are 12 weird facts about Pale Rider, and stick around for a bonus fact about the film's most famous scene that almost had a very different, terrifying ending. Let's ride into the storm. Number 12. Eastwood's war with his cinematographer. The film's breathtaking, snow-drenched visuals weren't just the product of artistic collaboration. They were the result of a cold war on set that nearly shattered the production. Clint Eastwood and his celebrated cinematographer, Bruce Surtees, a master of light and shadow who had shot Eastwood classics like The Outlaw, Josie Wales, and the sci-fi noir Blade Runner, had a major falling out during the production of Pale Rider. Their conflict was a clash of two titanic artistic visions. Surtees, a purist who had helped define the gritty, realistic look of 1970s cinema, wanted to create a more visually complex, textured, and shadowy world for the film. He envisioned a palette of grays and muted earth tones, emphasizing the harsh, unforgiving nature of the landscape and the moral ambiguity of the characters. Eastwood, however, was aiming for something entirely different. He wanted a more mythic, almost storybook quality, cleaner and more iconic, to reinforce the preacher's supernatural, almost divine status. He envisioned stark contrasts between the brilliant white snow and the dark figures moving through it, creating a visual allegory of good versus evil. Their arguments over lighting, composition, and camera placement became so heated and so frequent that they created a palpable tension on set. Crew members would watch in uncomfortable silence as the two men, both masters of their craft, would engage in hushed, intense debates. Surtees would reportedly turn his back on Eastwood between takes, a silent but powerful expression of his profound disagreement. The visual beauty of the final film wasn't just a happy accident, it was forged in the fire of this creative divorce, a stunning landscape born from two masters refusing to see eye to eye. This was their final film together, the tragic end of one of cinema's great collaborations, a partnership that shattered under the weight of a single, stark vision, leaving a legacy of beauty born from conflict. Number 11. Michael Moriarty's on-set meltdown. The film's sniveling, corporate villain, Coy LaHood, wasn't just a performance, it was a terrifyingly authentic reflection of an actor in the midst of a genuine personal crisis. Michael Moriarty, an Emmy-winning actor known for his brilliant but notoriously unstable and eccentric behavior, was struggling with severe personal issues during filming. He was battling a deep-seated fear of the Hollywood establishment, a growing dependence on alcohol, and a philosophical disillusionment that bled into every aspect of his work. His behavior on the set of Pale Rider became increasingly erratic and unpredictable. He would often show up late, forget his lines, and most disturbingly launch into long, rambling, philosophical monologues about the nature of good and evil that would leave the cast and crew completely baffled. His co-stars, including the ever-professional Clint Eastwood, were reportedly taken aback by his intensity and his refusal to break character. At one point, his agitation was so high that he got into a shouting match with Eastwood over the character's motivation, an act of professional suicide on a set led by one of Hollywood's most powerful stars. The performance we see on screen, a man constantly on the edge of a nervous breakdown, his eyes darting, his body twitching with paranoid energy, wasn't just acting. Moriarty was channeling his own real-life torment, his inner chaos giving the character of Coy LaHood a terrifying, unpredictable authenticity that no script could ever provide. He wasn't playing a man on the brink, he was a man on the brink, and the camera captured every agonizing moment of it. Number 10. The preacher was consciously deaf. The film's central character, the nameless preacher, wasn't just a mysterious hero or a classic Western archetype. He was a deliberate, terrifying embodiment of the pale horseman of the apocalypse from the Book of Revelation. Clint Eastwood and the screenwriter Dennis Shryack conceived the character not as a savior or a traditional man of God, but as a direct agent of divine retribution, a harbinger of death who comes to deliver judgment upon the wicked. This is why his backstory is deliberately non-existent, why he never speaks of his past, and why his methods are so swift, lethal, and devoid of human emotion. He isn't a man who has found God. He is God's wrath. The film's title isn't just a cool, evocative name. It's a direct biblical reference that defines the entire narrative and elevates it from a simple revenge story to a brutal, modern-day fable about divine justice. The preacher's arrival on a pale horse isn't a coincidence or a cool visual. It's a sign, a fulfillment of prophecy. It signals to the audience and to the characters that the end times have come for the greedy corporate miners who despoil the land. Every bullet he fires is not an act of murder, but an act of God. This dark theological concept gives the film its unique, almost mythological power, transforming a standard Western hero into a force of nature, an avenging angel of death walking the earth. Number 9. The film was a secret environmental parable. Beneath its classic Western plot of a small group of miners defending their claim from a powerful villain, Pale Rider is a thinly veiled and surprisingly progressive environmental allegory, a message that was far ahead of its time in 1985. The central conflict between the small-scale, independent gold panners and the massive, destructive hydraulic mining operation of Koila Hood is a direct and powerful parallel to the real-world environmental battles raging in America during the 1980s. Hydraulic mining, a real and historically devastating practice that uses high-pressure water cannons to literally tear apart mountainsides and riverbeds to extract gold, is portrayed in the film as a monstrous, soulless act of corporate greed that rapes the earth. The film shows the poisoned water, the eroded landscapes, and the utter devastation left in LaHood's wake. Released during the pro-business, anti-regulation Reagan era, the film was a quiet but powerful statement against the deregulation and corporate expansion of the time. The preacher's defense of the small miners wasn't just about protecting the little guy from a bully, it was about protecting the land itself from the ravages of unchecked avarice. The film wasn't just a Western, it was an eco-Western, a grim and prescient warning about the consequences of prioritizing profit over planet, a message that resonates even more powerfully today in an era of climate crisis and environmental collapse. Number 8. The film's brutal opening was a nod to High Plains Drifter. The film's iconic opening scene, where the preacher materializes out of the shimmering heat to save Hull Barrett and Megan from a group of LaHood's thugs, wasn't just a cool, atmospheric introduction. It was a deliberate and self-referential echo of Eastwood's 1973 supernatural Western High Plains Drifter. In that earlier film, Eastwood plays a ghostly marshal who returns from the dead to avenge a town that allowed him to be murdered. The opening of Pale Rider is structured almost beat for beat identically. In both films, a lone, mysterious rider appears out of nowhere, his face obscured, to dispense brutal, lightning-fast justice against a group of bullies terrorizing the innocent. This was Eastwood's way of signaling to his loyal audience that this was not just another Western, but a continuation of the dark, mythological universe he had been creating. The preacher isn't just a new character, he's a spiritual successor, a cousin to the man with no name and the stranger, another otherworldly avenger walking out of the mist to set things right. It was a piece of cinematic self-mythology, a way for Eastwood to connect his films and build his own legend, creating a cohesive universe of supernatural westerns where justice is delivered by forces beyond human understanding. Number 7. The Sierra Nevada location nearly killed the cast. The film's authentic, majestic beauty, which makes the landscape feel like a character in itself, came at a terrible and dangerous price. The production filmed on location in the remote and rugged Sawtooth National Recreation Area in central Idaho during the late fall and early winter of 1984. This choice, while visually stunning, created a brutal and unforgiving working environment that pushed the cast and crew to their physical limits. They were subjected to freezing temperatures that often plummeted well below zero, sudden blizzards that could shut down production for days, and the thin air of high altitudes that made even simple physical tasks exhausting. The hypothermia was so real and so constant a threat that special heaters had to be built under the floorboards of the indoor sets just to keep the actors' hands from going numb between takes. Several crew members suffered from frostbite and altitude sickness. The scene where Hull Barrett falls through the ice into the freezing river wasn't a special effect created with a studio tank. That was ice-cold, fast-moving river water, and actor Kyle Eastwood, Clint's son, was genuinely at risk of hypothermia, and could have been swept away by the current. The film's stunning winter backdrop wasn't just a beautiful backdrop, it was a genuine and constant adversary, a force of nature that the production had to fight every single day just to survive, making the on-screen struggle feel terrifyingly real. Number 6. The preacher's backstory was deliberately cut. The character of the preacher is a ghost, a man with no past, no history, and no human connections. This profound mystery wasn't an oversight or a result of lazy writing. It was a deliberate, difficult, and brilliant artistic choice. The original script and early drafts of the screenplay included a more conventional backstory for the preacher, revealing him as a former Confederate soldier who lost his faith and his family during the Civil War, which turned him into a cynical, violent wanderer. However, Eastwood and screenwriter Dennis Shryack made the bold decision to cut all references to his history. They wanted him to remain a pure symbol, an archetype of vengeance without a humanizing backstory to soften his edges or explain his motivations. By making him a blank slate, his actions become more mysterious and more divine. He is not a man seeking personal revenge or trying to atone for past sins. He is an instrument of fate, an abstract force of justice. This decision to erase his past wasn't just a simple script edit. It was the key to unlocking the film's unique mythological power, transforming a simple gunfighter into a legend and elevating the entire film from a revenge drama to a piece of modern mythology. Let's pause. The next 5 facts dig even deeper into the darkness, from the film's political controversies to the secrets hidden in the church and the final, explosive shootout. Number 5. The film's final gunfight was a rejected Dirty Harry scene. The film's climactic, slow-motion shootout in the dusty streets of LaHood's camp is one of the most iconic and visually stunning sequences in Eastwood's entire career, a masterclass in tension and ballistic choreography. But its origin story is surprising. The scene was originally written for the Deadpool, the fourth and final Dirty Harry film, which was in development around the same time. When that project was delayed due to script and casting issues, Eastwood and his longtime producing partner, Fritz Mainz, looked at the standalone scene and realized it would be a perfect climax for Pale Rider. They adapted the sequence, changing Harry Callahan's .44 Magnum for the preacher's Colt Peacemaker and the urban streets of San Francisco for a mining camp in the Old West. What makes this so fascinating is that one of the most classic Western shootouts of the 1980s was, in its inception, a modern urban cop scene. This cross-pollination shows how Eastwood saw his characters, whether a modern cop or a frontier preacher, as part of the same singular violent mythos. They are all Avengers who operate outside the law to deliver their own brand of brutal justice, and the scene's journey from a Dirty Harry script to a Pale Rider climax is a testament to the unified vision Eastwood had for his on-screen persona. Number 4. The church set was a real, abandoned ruin. The film's central location, the small, weathered, and hauntingly beautiful church where the miners and the preacher find sanctuary and community, wasn't a meticulously constructed movie set built on a soundstage. It was a real, abandoned, 19th century stone church that the location scouts found in a remote, almost inaccessible valley in the Idaho wilderness. The building, which had been abandoned for decades, was in a perfect state of picturesque decay, with a crumbling stone walls, a leaning steeple, and a graveyard full of weathered wooden crosses. The filmmakers were so struck by its authentic, spiritual atmosphere that they decided to use it exactly as it was, making only minimal reinforcements to the structure to ensure it was safe for the cast and crew. The sense of history, faith, and decay that permeates the location is completely genuine. What makes this so poignant is that this real, forgotten house of God became the perfect, sacred, yet haunting stage for the film's dark, spiritual drama. The church wasn't just a backdrop, it was a character in the film, a real ruin that provided the perfect physical space to explore the film's themes of faith, loss, and divine retribution. Number 3. The film angered religious groups. A film about a gun-toting, violent preacher who quotes scripture while methodically killing his enemies was, unsurprisingly, highly controversial and drew sharp criticism from several religious groups upon its release. Organizations representing various Christian denominations felt the film was a blasphemous and disrespectful portrayal of a man of the cloth. They argued that the film used Christian imagery, scripture, and the sacred iconography of the church as mere window dressing for a standard violent revenge fantasy, trivializing faith and the ministry in the process. The character of the preacher, who never preaches a sermon of peace or forgiveness, but only delivers a sermon of violent retribution, was seen as a particularly offensive and dangerous caricature that could mislead audiences about the nature of Christianity. The film wasn't just a Western, It was a theological lightning rod. A movie that dared to ask the uncomfortable question, what if the fourth horseman of the apocalypse carried a six-shooter and came to deliver judgment not just on sinners, but on an entire corrupt system? Number 2. The film was a response to revisionist westerns. By 1985, the Western genre had been thoroughly deconstructed by a wave of brilliant, cynical films in the 1970s, like Robert Altman's McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Eastwood's own Unforgiven, which portrayed the West as a brutal, cynical, and unheroic place where violence was ugly and there were no clear-cut heroes. Pale Rider was Clint Eastwood's direct and defiant response to this trend. He didn't want to make another cynical anti-Western. He wanted to make a heroic, mythological Western in the classic tradition of the films he grew up on by directors like John Ford and Howard Hawks, but updated for a modern audience with more sophisticated sensibilities. The Preacher is a conscious return to the mysterious, righteous, and nearly superhuman Avenger of Eastwood's Man with No Name trilogy, but with a new, supernatural, almost holy twist. The film wasn't just another Western for Eastwood, it was a statement of intent, a defiant stand against the tide of revisionism that had dominated the genre for a decade. It was a declaration that there was still room for heroes in the West, even if they came straight from the pages of the Book of Revelation. Number 1. It was Eastwood's favorite of his own Westerns. Of all the iconic and culturally significant Westerns Clint Eastwood has made in his legendary career, from the Sergio Leone Dollars trilogy to the outlaw Josie Wales to the Oscar-winning Unforgiven, he has repeatedly and consistently stated that Pale Rider is his personal favorite. The reason, he has explained in several interviews, is its simplicity and its mythological purity. He loves the character of the Preacher, a quiet, mysterious hero who says very little and acts with decisive, righteous fury. He also loves the film's overall tone, which he feels strikes a perfect balance between the classic westerns he loved as a young man and a more modern, sophisticated sensibility. For an actor who has created some of the most defining characters in the history of cinema, to call this one his favorite is the highest possible praise and the most telling insight into his artistic soul. The film wasn't just another job or another successful movie for Eastwood. It was a personal passion project, a perfect distillation of his own on-screen persona and his lifelong, off-screen love for the American West and its timeless myths. Bonus fact: the original ending was even darker. The film's ending, where the Preacher rides off into the sunset after his work is done, leaving Hull Barrett to pursue a life with Megan, is an iconic and satisfying conclusion to the myth. But the original scripted ending was even more stark, ambiguous, and chilling. In the first draft of the screenplay, after the final shootout, the Preacher doesn't ride away down the road. He simply vanishes. He is standing with Hull and Megan one moment, and the next, he is gone, as if he were never truly there at all, disappearing as mysteriously as he arrived. The filmmakers ultimately decided this was too ethereal and might confuse the audience, so they changed it to the more conventional, though still mythic, ride into the mountains. But the original idea, that the Avenger would simply disappear like a ghost once his divine mission was complete, is a far more fitting and powerful conclusion for a character who was conceived from the very beginning as the Pale Horseman of the Apocalypse. It was an ending that fully committed to the film's dark, supernatural premise, a final, haunting image that was left on the cutting room floor, a ghost of a different, more profound ending. Pale Rider endures as a unique and powerful entry in the canon of the Western, a film that is both a loving tribute to the classic era of the genre and a dark, modern reimagining of its core myths. It stands as a testament to Clint Eastwood's singular vision as a director and an actor, a film where he was able to merge his iconic Man with No Name persona with a new, almost supernatural layer of meaning. The darkness behind its creation, the on-set conflicts, the dangerous conditions, the controversial themes, only adds to its power and its mystique. It is a film that feels like a fable, a story told by a campfire under a vast starry sky, a reminder that in the eternal war between good and evil, between the loaded gun and the shovel, sometimes the only thing that stands between the helpless and the powerful is a pale rider on a pale horse, bringing the swift and terrible judgment of God. Like and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes revelations that change how you see your favorite movies forever. In the words of Stockburn, it's not a nice way to go, but for a film this good, it's a perfect way to ride into the sunset.